My wife Therese didn't scream when she said it. She didn't slam a dish onto the quartz island or throw her glass against the back of our sofa. If she had been yelling, maybe I could have filed it under heat-of-the-moment cruelty. We all say absurd things when the adrenaline hits the roof, but there was no adrenaline in our living room that Tuesday night. There was only the low hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the pendulum clock her mother had given us as a wedding present, and the gray light of a rainy August twilight settling over the windows. I had just come home from a 10-hour day at the architectural restoration firm where I work as a draftsman and structural consultant. My boots were by the door. I had made a quiet attempt to tidy up the mail on the hallway table, set my leather satchel down and stepped into the kitchen to start dinner. Therese was sitting on the high stool by the island, scrolling through her tablet with an idle, detached rhythm. I asked her how her afternoon at the gallery had gone. I didn't press. I just kept my voice warm, low, and uncluttered, the way I had trained myself to speak over the last 3 years whenever her mood turned brittle. She stopped scrolling. She didn't look up immediately. Instead, she set the tablet face down on the granite, folded her hands, and slowly raised her eyes to mine. Her expression wasn't angry. It was drained, flat, and almost clinical, like a surgeon assessing an organ that had long since stopped functioning. "Lyle," she said, her voice dropping into a register so steady it made my stomach coil. "I'm tired of looking at you." The house seemed to lose its draft for a second. The clock kept ticking, but the air felt heavy, dense, and unbreathable. "What do you mean?" I asked softly, holding a bunch of washed parsley over the sink. "I mean exactly what I said," she replied. She didn't blink. She didn't tilt her head. "I look at you sitting there. I look at the way you walk into a room, the way you adjust your glasses, the way you try so hard not to upset me, and it exhausts me. I am fundamentally completely tired of looking at you. It's not a phase. It's just how I feel every single time you exist in front of me." She didn't wait for my response. She stood up, picked up her tea mug, and walked down the hallway into our master bedroom, closing the door behind her with a soft, decisive click. Not a slam. Just a close. I stood by the sink for a long time. The parsley dried in my fingers. For 7 years, I had been the man who smoothed things over. I was the husband who apologized for arguments I hadn't started, who absorbed her sharp shifts in mood, who sacrificed my own hobbies, my fitness, my old friendships, and my peace of mind, just to keep her universe quiet and stable. I had slowly eroded myself down to a shadow, believing that if I became small enough, harmless enough, and agreeable enough, she would finally feel secure and love me back with the warmth she used to show when we first met in our mid-20s. Sitting there in that silent kitchen, watching the cold tap drip into the stainless steel basin, a sudden terrifying clarity washed over me. You cannot negotiate someone into respecting you, and you cannot make someone love a man who has erased himself just to keep them comfortable. I dropped the parsley into the compost bin. I walked into the hallway, pulled my duffel bag out of the hall closet, and went into the guest room where I kept my personal gear. I packed 5 changes of clothes, my work laptop, my sketchbook, my passport, my hygiene kit, and my set of hand chisels. I didn't touch her jewelry, I didn't leave a melodramatic note, and I didn't break anything. When I walked out to my truck, the rain was coming down in steady, rhythmic sheets. I loaded my bag into the back seat of my old F-150, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway without looking back at the bedroom window. That night, I drove out to a small coastal town about 45 minutes north of our suburb, a place called Oakhaven, where my older uncle Cormac owned a decommissioned timber mill and a small, rustic cabin adjacent to the yard. Cormac had passed away 2 years prior, leaving the property in a family trust that I managed. Nobody went up there much anymore. It was isolated, surrounded by white pines, damp salt air, and the quiet groan of old timber frame structures resting against the Atlantic coastline. When I unlocked the cabin door, the smell of aged cedar, iron, and dry dust greeted me. It was cold, raw, and entirely devoid of the polished, air-conditioned perfection of the house I had spent 7 years paying for. I set my duffel bag on the floor, built a fire in the wood stove with dried pine scraps, and sat on the edge of the narrow frame bed. My phone rang 3 times between 10 p.m. and midnight. It was Therese. I didn't answer. At 12:30 a.m., a text message came through. "Where did you go? Don't do this dramatic nonsense, Lyle. Come home so we can talk about this like adults. I stared at the screen for a moment. In the past, that tone would have sent me into panic mode. I would have driven straight back, apologized for leaving, and tried to fix whatever unspoken rift had caused her outburst. But looking at those words in the flickering light of the wood stove, I realized something vital. She didn't want to talk like adults. She wanted her sounding board back. She wanted her comfortable punching bag. I turned the phone to Do Not Disturb, laid my head back on the stiff cotton pillow, and listened to the rain strike the tin roof. I didn't sleep more than 2 hours that night. But for the first time in years, my lungs didn't feel constricted. The first 10 days were a trial of deep, agonizing detox. When you have spent years living in a state of hypervigilance, monitoring another person's tone, footsteps, facial expressions, and micro-reactions, silence feels almost violent at first. My body was so used to cortisol that my hands shook when I poured my coffee in the morning. I kept expecting to hear a door snap open or a sharp side complaint about how I breathed, how I dressed, or how I existed in space. By the end of the first week, Therese's messages shifted from annoyed command to subtle frustration, then to cold silence. August 14th. Your silence is ridiculously immature. You left me with the house maintenance. August 16th. Fine. Take your little break. Let me know when you're ready to act like a husband again. August 18th. No texts. I didn't reply to any of them. I reached out to a trusted lawyer, a steady old family friend named Vance, and explained the situation clearly. I told him I wasn't looking to destroy anyone, but I was stepping out of the marriage permanently and wanted my finances secured cleanly. Vance set up a separate bank account for my personal earnings, drafted a formal separation notice, and advised me to keep my distance while he managed the initial communication with her legal representation. With the legal machinery moving quietly in the background, I turned my attention inward. I looked at myself in the small fogged mirror above the cabin sink, and I didn't like what I saw. My shoulders were slouched forward, a physical posture I had developed subconsciously to make myself look less intimidating whenever Therese was stressed. My skin was pale, my eyes carried dark circles of chronic exhaustion, and my muscles had softened after years of abandoning my morning runs because she found my early alarms disruptive. I decided that I wasn't going to spend this month marinating in self-pity or waiting for a miracle. If I had built the life that crushed me, I was the only person who could build a new one. Starting on day 12, I created a ruthless daily routine. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., before the sun broke over the pine canopy, I put on my old running shoes and hit the dirt roads winding along the rocky shoreline. The cold salt air burned my lungs, but it woke something up inside me that had been dormant since my college days. I ran until my legs burned and my chest heaved. After running, I went into Cormac's old timber workshop. The space was filled with untouched slabs of kiln-dried white oak, black walnut, and old-growth heart pine. For years, I had dreamed of restoring custom furniture and timber joinery, but Therese had always dismissed it as a dirty, noisy hobby that clutters up the garage. I cleared out the cobwebs, oiled Cormac's old hand planes, sharpened my chisels until they could shave arm hair, and started working on a massive, heavy timber dining table made of salvaged heart pine. The work was brutal, tactile, and honest. Wood doesn't lie to you. It doesn't give you silent treatment, and it doesn't shift its expectations based on its mood. If your cuts are precise, the mortise and tenon fit perfectly. If your cuts are lazy, the joint fails. Day after day, I planned oak and pine. Long, ribbon-like curls of fragrant wood covered the concrete floor of the workshop. My hands, which had grown soft and smooth from years of sitting at a CAD workstation and tiptoeing around domestic walking on eggshells, developed hard, thick calluses. My shoulders dropped back into their natural alignment as the chest muscles opened up from hours of manual labor and daily pushing. I cut out processed sugar, lived on simple whole foods, fresh mackerel from the local harbor docks, eggs, rice, greens, and black coffee, and spent my evenings reading structural engineering history and sketching furniture designs by candle and oil lamp. By week 3, something profound had shifted in my mind. The phantom voice of Therese, that internal critic that had governed my every move for 7 years, started to fade. When I looked in the mirror, I wasn't looking at the beaten-down husband trying to figure out how to avoid an argument. I was looking at Lyle Vance, 34 years old, 6'2", broad-shouldered, clear-eyed, and completely independent, I had lost 15 pounds of soft inflammable weight and gained dense muscle. My skin was tanned from working in the open doors of the timber yard. But more than the physical change, my eyes had changed. The quiet panic was gone. In its place was a cold, still reservoir of self-command. Exactly 32 days after I walked out of our house, I had to return to town. Vance needed me to sign hard copies of the separation paperwork and property disclosure forms at his office in the city center. Additionally, I needed to drop off a set of restored architectural blueprints at a client's design showroom located in the high-end arts district, the very same district where Therese managed her boutique contemporary art gallery. I knew there was a chance I might bump into someone we knew, but I felt no anxiety about it. The fear had completely burned off in the timber yard. It was a crisp Thursday morning in mid-September. I dressed simply but deliberately. Dark selvage denim, a fitted charcoal Henley under an old brown leather field jacket I'd pulled from storage, and clean timber boots. My hair was cut short and neat, my beard trimmed tight to my jawline. I finished my meeting with Vance around 11:00 a.m. Everything was moving forward smoothly. Therese had apparently been stunned when she received the formal separation papers from Vance's office a week prior. According to my lawyer, she had called his office 3 times demanding to speak to me directly, unable to comprehend that I had bypassed her emotional control completely. After leaving Vance's office, I walked 2 blocks down the avenue toward the design showroom with my leather portfolio under my arm. The sun was sharp and bright, cutting through the autumn chill. As I approached the corner near the gallery street, I saw her. Therese was walking out of a high-end coffee shop on the corner, holding a paper cup in one hand and her phone in the other. She was talking animatedly to a female colleague from the gallery. I didn't dodge into a doorway. I didn't change my stride. I didn't speed up, and I didn't slow down. I simply walked forward on the sidewalk, holding my head high, breathing easily, my weight centered over my heels. She looked up from her phone just as I crossed the threshold of the outdoor seating area, about 10 feet away from her. The moment her eyes landed on me, she froze in her tracks. Her colleague kept walking for 2 steps before noticing Therese had stopped dead in the middle of the pavement. Therese's coffee cup tipped slightly in her grip, hot liquid sloshing over the lid onto her knuckles, but she didn't seem to feel it. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The man standing 10 feet in front of her was not the man who had left her kitchen a month ago. The slouched posture was gone. The timid, pleading look in the eyes was gone. The pale, stressed face she had spent years diminishing was gone. Standing in front of her was a man built of dense muscle, sun-baked skin, hard calluses, and an unshakable, quiet aura of complete detachment. "Lyle," she whispered. Her voice lacked all of its usual sharp, polished authority. It sounded small, thin, and bewildered. I stopped, holding my portfolio comfortably against my hip. I looked at her directly, not with anger, not with spite, and not with hidden longing. I looked at her with the exact same objective clarity she had used on me 32 nights ago. "Hello, Therese," I said. My voice was deeper than she remembered, grounded from weeks of silence and hard breathing. She took a step toward me, her eyes frantically scanning my face, my shoulders, the way my jacket fit, the clear line of my jawline. Her colleague looked back and forth between us, sensing the sudden, suffocating shift in the air, and quietly excused herself into the gallery. "Lyle, where have you been?" Therese asked, her breath coming a little faster. "I've been calling Vance's office. You look completely different. What happened to you?" "I took your advice," I replied calmly. She blinked, confused. "My advice? You told me you were tired of looking at you," I said. My tone as even as a planed oak plank. "You were right. I was tired of looking at that man too. He was soft, passive, and foolish enough to think he could earn respect by letting himself be dismantled. So I got rid of him." A flicker of panic, true, unvarnished panic, flashed across her eyes. It was the expression I had never seen on her face in 7 years of marriage. She was used to being the prize, the arbiter of emotional climate, the one who held the power of validation and withdrawal. Now, she was looking at a man who no longer needed a single scrap of anything she had to offer. "Lyle, listen to me," she said, stepping closer, reaching her hand out toward my sleeve. Her fingers trembled slightly. We spoke out of anger that night. I was stressed from the gallery opening. I didn't mean it like that. We haven't even talked properly. You can't just send legal papers through an office or strangers. Come home tonight. Let's sit down, open a bottle of wine, and talk through this. We can fix this. I looked at her hand hovering near my arm. A month ago, that gesture would have brought me to my knees with relief. I would have grabbed it like a lifeline in a storm. Now, it felt light, empty, and entirely irrelevant. I didn't pull away aggressively. I simply shifted my weight slightly, taking a half step back to keep my boundary intact. "Therese," I said, keeping my gaze locked onto hers, "you meant every word you said that night. It was the most honest thing you've said to me in 4 years. You were tired of looking at me because you had lost all respect for a man who allowed himself to be treated the way I let you treat me." "That's not true," she started, her voice cracking. "It is true," I interrupted gently. "And the sad thing is, I don't blame you for losing respect for that guy. I lost respect for him too. But the difference is I did something about it. I built a life I respect. And that life doesn't have a place for you in it anymore." "Lyle, please," she said, her eyes welling with sudden heavy tears. "You're throwing 7 years away. You can't just look at me like I'm a stranger." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said quietly. "I'm just putting down what was breaking my back." I looked down at my watch. "I have a meeting across the street at 11:30. Vance will handle all the administrative details for the property division. You can keep the house. I'll take the cabin property up north and my grandfather's tools. It's more than fair." She stood there on the sunny sidewalk, surrounded by the bustling lunchtime crowd of the city, looking at me as if I had suddenly transformed into an immovable mountain. For the first time in our entire relationship, she had nothing to say. No witty comeback, no dismissive insult, no emotional leverage to pull. "Take care of yourself, Therese," I said. I didn't wait for her to respond. I stepped around her, walked down the pavement with steady, even strides, and crossed the street toward the design showroom. I didn't turn around to see if she was watching me. I didn't need to. For the first time in 7 years, I was looking straight ahead. A lesson from the protagonist: reclaiming your sovereignty. If you are reading this right now, whether you are sitting in a silent car, lying in a quiet room, or tiptoeing around someone in your own home, I want you to listen to me very carefully. When a relationship begins to curdle, most good-hearted people make a fatal, tragic mistake. They believe that more tolerance will eventually produce more love. We convince ourselves that if we just absorb a little more disrespect, shrink our boundaries a little smaller, apologize a little faster, and walk a little lighter on the floorboards, the person we love will suddenly wake up and realize how valuable we are. It is a lie. It is an absolute self-destructive delusion. Here are the hard truths I learned during those 32 days in the timber yard, and I hope they save years of your life. 1. Tolerating disrespect does not build loyalty. It builds contempt. When you allow someone to treat you poorly without facing real, immediate, and dignified consequences, they do not feel grateful for your patience. They lose respect for your boundaries. Human beings do not value what costs them nothing, and if your presence in their life carries no price tag of mutual respect, your presence becomes worthless to them. 2. The trap of the nice partner. Being a good partner does not mean becoming a human doormat. Real love requires 2 complete, upright individuals standing side by side, not one person standing and another lying flat so they don't trip. The moment you start shrinking yourself to keep someone else comfortable, you are no longer in a relationship. You are in an emotional hostage situation of your own making. 3. Walking away is not revenge. It is self-preservation. When someone tells you, either through explicit words like Therese's or through chronic passive actions, that they do not value your presence, believe them. Do not argue with them. Do not try to debate them into changing their mind. Do not throw a dramatic, screaming temper tantrum. Dignity is quiet. Pack your things, close the door gently, and walk away. The most powerful response to chronic disrespect is not anger. It is the total, permanent withdrawal of your energy and attention. 4. Build a life you respect before expecting anyone else to. If you look in the mirror and see a person who has abandoned their health, their passions, their physical strength, and their self-worth to keep a toxic dynamic alive, change it immediately. Fall in love with hard work, physical discipline, honest craftsmanship, and clean living. When you build a version of yourself that you respect deeply, the opinions of people who tried to make you feel small will no longer have any power over you. 5. Never go back to what broke you. Just because it's familiar, when you finally step into your power, the people who took you for granted will often try to pull you back into the old pattern. They don't necessarily miss you. They miss the control, the convenience, and the safety net you provided. Do not mistake their sudden panic for genuine repentance. Once you have built your strength in the storm, never return to the house that tore down your roof. Stand up, pull your shoulders back, set your boundaries, and step forward into your own life. You owe it to the person you were meant to be. What is one boundary you've been hesitating to set in your own life because you're afraid of the conflict it might cause?